It's trailer week this week, as all sorts of animated productions and then some are getting all sorts of reveals all at the same time. Now that we're in the second half of the month of Halloween, I guess this is how it goes. We've had the likes of Sing getting a Halloween special, Moana 2 getting their final trailer, and then Netflix going ham with Arcane Season 2, as well as Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Fowl. We're talking about another Aardman production, 2 days after saying their most latest movie is kinda terrible. Whoops. But yes, you know my feelings about Aardman at this point. I absolutely adore this studio. It's the British animation studio, and of course the British guy's a big fan of that. And whilst we've talked about this Wallace and Gromit movie a couple of times now, through its little peaks and pop-ups, now finally we get a proper trailer. It's still a teaser and it's less than a minute, but there you go. Now we can finally make some proper judgments. It's not just a single scene or two. And what do you know? It looks good. It's interesting. After seeing specifically Wallace and Gromit for literal decades now, it's very nice to actually see the original duo looking so crisp and high quality. It's almost a culture shock to see them done in such a modern lens, even though it's just better animation. Anyway, obviously, this movie is so far looking pretty great, and it's very classically British. A lot of the elements of this movie might not be felt by a more American audience, but even in this teaser trailer, the very first person who shows up, the first person who even starts speaking, is in fact a relatively new British comedian celebrity in the form of Diane Morgan. Although you might have seen some of her clips if you watch too much TikTok like me. She plays Kunk. If you know, you know. If you don't, you should get to know. It's good.
Do you think billionaires like Elon Musk should be worried about getting guillotined?
Of course, when it comes to Aardman, they love representing more British accent diversity, and it's all the same here. Wallace and Gromit, anyway, is set up north, so it makes sense they're taking on more northern English celebrities and entertainers. And we've also heard little infos in the past about elements of this movie coming together, like the fact that Peter Kay's coming back as the policeman with a really long head. Again, a classic British comedian entertainer getting some good extra screen time.
This was arson. Someone arsing around.
Now this time around, it seems to be more of a sort of crime investigation movie. We know there's a plot about an AI-driven gnome, whilst the real villain is in fact Feathers McGraw making a comeback. But now we get to see a little bit of that coming to fruition as Wallace is mobbed at his very front door by a news team and an angry population. And so it seems Gromit must go off on an adventure to save Wallace and clear his name, eventually going up against the other silent animal of this universe. You can see in the back lines like, "Where's our stuff?" suggesting that the gnome has been stealing items and probably hacked by Feathers. And who knows how large this story goes, as it seems Feathers himself is a boss now. As in, they actually have some people working beneath them? Who knows, maybe they commandeered the entire zoo they were sent to. Whatever the case, this is a classic Wallace and Gromit romp. Everything we've seen so far looks nice, polished, bright and clean, and it's not in a way that ruins the vibe of the whole saga, like, you know, Chicken Run 2 kinda does. Wallace and Gromit, I think, is more than happy, looking happy and cheery. And though the original, specifically with Feathers McGraw, does look notably grim, and it adds to the whole aesthetic considering he rocks out a revolver at some point, I think here, it's perfectly fine. Plus, it's only the early days. You never know what directions they might surprise us with next. Or maybe they'll go back to some old classics. The big finale of the Feathers McGraw movie was that there was that famous train track scene, and there is one scene of Gromit and Feathers McGraw on a little canal boat. And down below, what do you know, is another railroad track. In fact, it does look like there will be an extended sequence taking place at the very zoo that the penguin was chucked over to, as we see multiple scenes placed within that zoo, like the big old submarine sequence. Adding that to the whole canal scene, my mind is now just mentally warping this movie into having the same plotline movements as the Finding Dory movie for some reason. Go to an aquarium, come out on some sort of chase sequence, but that's probably just me. Hey there, you're halfway through the video. Thank you very much for getting this far. Come subscribe if you're interested in more trailer news. I've got several to talk about this week. And let me know your thoughts on Wallace and Gromit. Otherwise, I'll let you get back to the second half of this video. You know the drill. Now, alongside just this teaser trailer, we got a few extra little press details about this movie. The main one really being talked about is some other voice cast members being involved in this movie, naturally being all the more British entertainers, actors, and comedians of some sort. Some of which you may know, some of which you don't. And whilst we got to see Diane Morgan actually in her role in this teaser,
live outside the West Wallaby Street house,
and we mentioned earlier that Peter Kay will be coming back, we've also got Adjoa Ando, who you may know from Bridgerton.
Do try not to bungle it up.
Muz Khan from Brazic and Gallivant, Lenny Henry from Three Little Birds, or maybe more universally known for The Lord of the Rings, The Ring of Power, if you watch that show, as well as Reese Shearsmith, who's playing Norbot the Smart Gnome.
Call me Norbot. Pleased to meet you.
Reese being in just about everything, but for me personally, he's like the co-creator and one of the starring roles for Inside Number 9, which is like British Black Mirror. And considering Black Mirror is already kind of British comedy, and it's got a British creator, it really says something. For Britain as a culture, this movie just has everything all blending in together, as it usually is. It kind of is a central piece that brings us together every Christmas, when it releases on a Christmas. Now, the only other murmur really going on at this stage about this movie is the fact that, hey, what do you know, this released on the Netflix YouTube channel because, yes, this is not getting a theatrical release. It is not that grand a scale. In fact, the runtime is only 70 minutes long, which is why even in this third mention of news for this movie, we've got 52 seconds, and a chunk of that goes to the Netflix logo. But yes, this is a straight-to-streaming movie. Is it the Pixar scenario of British animation? Maybe. I think maybe the contexts are a little bit better there. You know, Netflix is kind of guaranteed to do well, and it's a lot more, you know, popular. It's kind of more in your face. But I have been seeing a lot of people mention their gripes over the fact that it's kind of underwhelming to have such a great animation presentation, and we don't even get to see it in cinemas, you know? Well, actually, it's not quite that bad necessarily. For once, there's a change that actually benefits the Brits. What a surprise, a British studio wants to prioritize the British audience. If you're in the UK, it'll be premiering on BBC One on Christmas Day, as well as premiering on BBC iPlayer, which is just another streaming service for the BBC. And then will be available globally on Netflix on January 3rd as well. You don't even get to see it this year. Is it a shame? To a certain extent, yeah, but also I think if a full cinema release was made for this movie and then it still turned out to be 70 minutes, I could see a lot of people having gripes that it's a little bit underwhelming in that way. Wallace Gromit likes to sort of get in and get out as fast as possible. They're very particular about how many frames they even want to show. It does take a lot of work to make a frame, so I guess they try and minimize it. But nonetheless, for the actual proper release, the main priority is going to be to the British audience, and it's still going onto the #1 platform in the country on the day where everyone sits and gathers around to watch it. So in that sense, it's very much getting a traditional release. BBC One Christmas Day is usually put for all the biggest highlights. They also do it for Doctor Who specials. And at least on the home country, it is as normal as can be. If anything, I guess going against the modern norms. So maybe it's a compromise between a bad case scenario and, hey, pretty normal. Whatever the case, Wallace and Gromit is coming together slowly but surely in tiny little sneaks and previews. What I'll be excited to see is whether the ending of this film will hint into what's coming into the next one. Pixar love their Easter eggs. I'd love if Aardman did the same. But for now, I'm going to end it off there for my little updated thoughts as we see more and more of Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video, and I shall see you in a little bit.